What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Grinderslive for basketball here today, noon Eastern, Mr. Devin, 11 o'clock Tennessee time. And I'm Brett Devine, and we're talking to the newly minted $87,500 man, John, a.k.a. Squirrel Patrol. Congrats on your nice live, in quotation marks, final appearance there. Good lineup yesterday.
Thank you. Yeah, it's 2 years in a row, top 10 in the DK NBA Finals, and that pays really well. So yeah, it's great.
You couldn't win back to back like Raging Phillip. Come on!
Oh my God! Yeah, I'm so happy to be top 10 2 years in a row. He's like, yeah, I'm going for a three-peat next year.
Yeah. So you'll have to. I'm sure you'll be battling him out. He's always one of your tough opponents when you play in those things too.
Yeah.
But big congrats on that. Today we're gonna talk NBA for today. And we're gonna, I've been watching these shows, and the first two games, right? Everything was up in the air. Hey, what were the rotations going to look like? Who was going to play minutes? And today, I think we're going to really look back at what happened in the game ones and try to determine if the minutes are correct, if the projections are correct, if the rotations are going to be the same. Because I think every game has some things that are going to be a little bit in flux. Like some of the Brooklyn minutes. What's Denver going to do with their rotation? I think we can sort of try to hash this out throughout the show here, John.
Yeah, this is great because I kind of have my own opinions on this, so I'm interested to hear what you think, and then we can kind of see where it overlaps.
Yeah, so let's sort of jump right into this. If you guys have any questions too, right? There's 4 games. It's a 50-minute show. We got time to kick it with you. Interact with us in chat. I got an eye on over here. If you got any questions for me and John as it relates to ownership, who's playing. I'm not doing MME today. I know John will be. Maybe we can pick his brain on a couple guys. He's looking to be over under the field on. We can have some fun today. But I want to jump right into the first game of the slate here. We've got Brooklyn at Toronto, and I'm going to spend a lot of time on the game flow tool on Rotogrinders today because I don't know, it just lets me see what happened in the first game very easily. And we can see our what actually happened. When did guys get subbed in? Who did they get subbed in out for? Were guys in foul trouble? Turnovers. There's a couple of those. A guy who gets a couple 3 fouls quick and then turns it over in the first minute of the third quarter, gets yanked. You'll see that in the Denver game when we get to it. But what are we doing here? And let's relate to price. The first thing I want to go over, we'll start with the Brooklyn side here. And to me, you can see all these guys. So if you scroll over here, Garrett Temple, they basically all sat the final, I'm going to call it 4 minutes because the game turned into a blowout. And even though with a big spread, right, these projected blowout games really only turn into blowouts less than half the time. Sometimes they're a little bit closer on things like that. Are you projecting, in your, what you're doing today? Do you think this game's going to be a blowout, or are you giving Garrett Temple 38 minutes? Are you giving Karis LeVert 39 minutes in your projections right now?
So, yeah, I don't think it's going to necessarily turn into a blowout. The spread is kind of closer than I would have thought. I guess 11.5. But I think Brooklyn can keep it closer than that. There were a couple minutes things that I thought were really interesting on the Brooklyn side, and I was actually looking at this exact page earlier today. I noticed it looks like TLC started the third quarter.
Mm-hmm.
He went in place of Kurucs, and Brooklyn actually outscored them by 15 points in the third quarter.
Yep.
So I'm interested to see, and then Toronto came back in the fourth, but I'm interested to see maybe if TLC gets some more playing time, just because that seemed to work well in the third quarter for them.
Yeah, he could start. I mean, I think a lot of things are in flux, especially for a team like the Nets, right? Where nothing's really set in stone. They have nothing to play for. Why not try some things out? I don't think it's out of the question that maybe TLC gets a start or pretty much plays these 33 minutes. And Kurucs, who wasn't really doing too much, and it looks like when he was on the court, right? Yep, getting crushed when he's on the court. TLC's on the court. They start actually being able to contribute a little bit here. I think you might be onto something.
Yeah, and I don't really think of TLC as a scorer, but he seems to be taking that role for them off the bench, and I guess starting the third quarter. So he's someone I actually have some tournament interest in because I think they're going to be looking to him for bench points, and I think he might be a better NBA player than a lot of people think.
Yeah, I also think too, if you think this game's going to be close, all these starters, Joe Harris, 33 minutes. You tack on the extra 4 minutes, right? He's at 37 minutes. LeVert's almost at 40 minutes. Garrett Temple's almost at 40 minutes. If this game stays close, I would have expected these guys to close out the fourth quarter. I don't see any reason for these guys to, if it's close, I'm basically projecting Garrett Temple to play 38 or 39 minutes. I think I'm projecting Karis LeVert to play 39 minutes today in a close game. I don't think our projections have that right now. So if you're in a believer that this game stays close, a lot of these guys are going to project a lot better than anyone else using the Rotogrinders, projections right now. I think there's some room for these guys to almost all play 40 minutes today.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at what happened yesterday. I mean, I know it's an 11.5-point spread, and that seems really wide. But, look at what happened yesterday with Milwaukee and Orlando. I mean, Orlando beat them pretty handily, and they were, I think, a 12 or 13-point underdog.
Yeah, that Milwaukee just didn't show up in Orlando. They just sort of handed to him. Milwaukee, they didn't even play. They treated it like a regular season game, right? Like 34 minutes, 31 minutes, where all these good teams are throwing out their best players for 40 minutes a game. And that's the playoffs. And I guess we can kind of go to the Toronto team here. I want to go over a couple things here. The first is Pascal Siakam. He got into a little bit of foul trouble. Only 31 minutes, a really good fantasy point per minute producer. I would expect him in a close game, right? He's going to fill in this gap, and he's basically going to play the entire fourth quarter. You can see Nick Nurse, he has no problem. Hey, Kyle Lowry, go play the whole fourth quarter. Serge Ibaka and Marc Gasol, we can talk about that. I think all their starters in a close game are going to play the fourth quarter, which would basically give me 40 minutes on Siakam, basically 40 minutes across the board on all their starters, minus whatever happens between Marc Gasol and Serge Ibaka. If it stays close, like, you can get 40 minutes from 9:30. I would say you're going to get 38 minutes or more from 9 players in this game.
Yeah, I think so. I am interested on the Toronto side to see what's going on with Marc Gasol, because he left in the middle of that third quarter and never came back. And he was on my live final team that ended up doing well, but he was the weak link, and he was the first player.
Hey, Devin, mute.
There
we go.
What does he say? All right. But yeah, so I'm interested to see what happens with Marc Gasol, because he really left in that third quarter and didn't come back. And it's possible that Toronto just thinks that Serge Ibaka is a better matchup with Brooklyn. Yeah,
I don't know if it's out of the question that, like, Marc Gasol, I wouldn't play Gasol. If you're in lineup HQ, you're making teams. I wouldn't play Gasol and Ibaka on the same team. I think that's kicking yourself below the belt there. But I think Gasol could play 30 minutes today. I think maybe not 30, but maybe Gasol gets the 28 minutes and Ibaka gets the 20 minutes. I think it's a pretty fluid situation. I don't have a particular read other than Serge was pretty good, and Marc Gasol, I think he was just playing well. He had 2 turnovers, and I think Nick Nurse was just like, hey, let's put in Serge Ibaka. I don't need Marc Gasol turning the ball over while the Nets are scoring some points when TLC was sort of going on his run. I think maybe that's what happened. I don't know. I think it's a little fluid what happens with those 2 minutes.
Yeah, I do. I think there's a possibility that TLC gets more run in place of Kurucs. I think it's a little bit of a smaller lineup, and I think it's possible that Nick Nurse counters that by playing a little bit more Serge Ibaka. So I'm a little wary on Marc Gasol, but I mean, part of that could be just my own mental thing, because it looked like he was going to screw me in the live final. So I'm a little bit down on Gasol right now. But I mean, there's a theory maybe TLC and Ibaka both get a little bit more playing time than Kurucs and Gasol.
All right, so let's talk some of these guys for DFS today. Who are we using? We got Lowry on FanDuel. I think he projects as one of the highest owned players on the entire slate at point guard. There's really only like 3 or 4 point guards on FanDuel I'm all too interested in. He's 8K in a close game, right? You basically have to give him 39 to 40 minutes, I think is a reasonable expectation. We're at 37. I mean, I have no problem bumping him to 38 or 39 minutes, which would even give you more of him on lineup HQ builds. We saw a couple of their other players have some good games too. We saw Fred VanVleet have himself quite the game too. Who do you prefer between those 2 in the backcourt? Are you okay using them both in the same lineup? How are you approaching that?
I am okay using them both in the same lineup. I kind of prefer Lowry. I like Lowry a little bit more on FanDuel just because the positions are a little bit more structured. But I like Lowry more than VanVleet.
Yeah, Lowry too. If you go look at the game flow, he had a full shift basically in the third quarter where he scored absolutely 0 fantasy points, right? That's not a typical Kyle Lowry game. So he's got, he can be the one going for 50 fantasy points today, not Fred VanVleet. So I like him quite a bit. I like Van Vliet as well. We already mentioned Serge, Marc Gasol. I think either one of them has the ability to play the higher end of the minutes today. I think it's going to be fluid, pretty much throughout the series. That's my personal take on it. The other guys, right? OG Anunoby, Norman Powell. These are sort of the other rotation players. How are you mixing them in? I know our Draftkings optimal, I think it had Anunoby in it the last time I was looking at it. Not someone I think has a ton of upside, right? When you have all the other star players playing 40 minutes. What are you doing with him today?
So he was in the optimal for DraftKings or for FanDuel?
I think on DraftKings a lot. I mean,
I like him. I like him more on FanDuel because he's a big steals guy. So
he's not in there anymore on DraftKings.
Okay. Yeah, it would surprise me a little. I mean, it's possible an early run had him in or something, but I think I like him a little bit more on FanDuel because he fills the small forward position, which can be hard to fill, and then he gets 3 points per steals, whereas he only gets 2 on DraftKings. So I kind of like OG a little bit more on FanDuel.
All right. And then the Brooklyn guys, how are we handling them? Right. We've got Karis LeVert, great fantasy point per minute player. They sort of stifled him, but then it just led to a bajillion assists for him in the last game. So I think he has multiple ways to get there, points, assists, and he should I think I would project him for the most minutes of any net in a close game, probably like 38 to 39 minutes, in my opinion, today. I think he's a pretty solid low-owned play today. I'm looking at the ownership, 15% on FanDuel. I go over to DraftKings. He's sitting there sub 20% on a 4-game slate to get these players capable of going for 50-plus fantasy points at low ownership. That sounds like something you might want to have interest in.
Yeah, so I'm more interested in him on DraftKings than on FanDuel because I think on FanDuel, you don't get the extra guard spot, the utility spot. And it's hard, like he's priced, I think, more than Donovan Mitchell on FanDuel. Mm-hmm. So I don't necessarily like LeVert there, but on DraftKings, I agree. I think he's going to be a lower owned guy that has more upside. And so, yeah, I like LeVert on FanDuel.
Yeah, I like Harris on DraftKings with the 3-point bonus. Are you on board with that? He's sitting at 5,000, and to get someone who's going to play 37 minutes in a close game that can bomb threes seems like a good person to pick if Karis LeVert's going to get shut down offensively. That leaves Harris wide open for some threes.
Yeah, I agree. I like his price on DraftKings. I like the multi-position eligibility, shooting guard or small forward, and yeah, the 3-point bonus. He's getting the extra half point there.
Yeah, and then a couple other guys. Real quick, Jared Allen basically at no ownership on DraftKings or FanDuel. Let me make sure he's not really garnering much. Yeah, but sub 10% ownership on a 4-game slate. Another one, right? He played 34 minutes, a close game that should equate to about 38 minutes, in my opinion. Low owner, like, you always want to mix in, I think, on these 4-game slates, you're trying to win these really large field contests. A couple of guys that are sub 10, 12% owned into your lineups. I mean, Jared Allen sounds like someone that fits that bill.
I think he'll be less than 10% owned. I don't know how interested I am in him.
Well, why not? I mean, I see a guy who's like a fantasy point per minute. You pencil guys in for, that's not even really accounting for his upside at all.
Yeah. I mean, it's possible. I think if Gasol is starting, which I expect, it's a tough matchup for Jared Allen because Gasol has got so much size. And then Jared Allen, I think, is just center eligible on both sides. Obviously on FanDuel, but also on DraftKings. So there's an opportunity cost, right? If you take Jared Allen, and you can't take Embiid and Porzingis and Jared Allen. So a little bit less, like, of the guys we've mentioned on Brooklyn, I think he's the one I'm least interested in.
And then Kurucs, right? He started last game. 1, I'm not sure if he actually starts. And 2, I'm also concerned that the TLC thing sort of rears its head again today. I have basically, if you're not playing, 30-plus minutes on this 4-game slate, guaranteed, I basically have no interest in you today.
Yeah, I agree. And I think he was in foul trouble last game, so maybe that played into it. Maybe he still does start. But, yeah, I think he's the riskiest, and he doesn't strike me as a high upside player.
Yeah, he had 4 fouls. Maybe that led into TLC, right? A little bit there. They didn't want to play him in the first, and TLC got hot, and he just really never saw the floor again because TLC was playing good. So keep an eye on that. I think that about wraps up this game. Favorite play overall from you on this game, each site?
Each site. Let's see. FanDuel probably Kyle Lowry, and then DraftKings probably Joe Harris.
How much Kyle Lowry you could have on fan? We haven't projected at 60% right now. You're going up to that?
60%.
So you could be one of your 80% guys?
Probably not that high. Probably not 80%. But I'll probably have a good chunk of them. There really just aren't that many good point guards on FanDuel.
Yeah, there's maybe 3, and then you can stretch it to some of the cheap guys, but I don't know if I'd go that way in FanDuel.
Yeah.
Today. All right, let's go to the next game. We got Utah and Denver, and this is a really interesting game. We've got the recency bias of Utah, and we've got a Denver rotation that I think who knows what the hell can happen on some of these guys on the Denver rotation. So I want to focus there first and basically use – I'm sure you were looking at this page trying to figure out what the hell happened between the second half and overtime with some of these guys, because we'll just start at the top here. Torrey Craig starts, has a couple 3 fouls here in the second quarter, has a turnover immediately to start the second half, and basically gets benched in favor of Jeremy Grant, which led Jeremy Grant to get a bunch of run, and then Grant also ends up starting in overtime. You also have PJ Dozier somehow is the guy they want to play in overtime. A little confusing to me out of nowhere on that one. I guess I can't read too much into the overtime minutes, but I think the minutes, at least for, in a regulation game, are probably an uptick maybe for Torrey Craig. I think maybe a little bit of a downtick for Jeremy Grant. And then you had Michael Porter, who couldn't stop anybody defensively. He sort of gets sit, doesn't play overtime. If he's shooting well and can even stop someone once in a while, right, his minutes are going to go back up into the 35 to 40 minute range. So I think there's a lot to decipher here on this Denver team.
There is. And so I put this in the expert survey, just this game as a whole. It's interesting because I keep hearing from a bunch of people like, oh, recency bias. Everyone's going to be on that Denver-Utah game. I don't want to have any part of it. I don't know about that because I think there's probably more people avoiding the game because of recency bias than there are people loading up on it because it had a really high score.
What takes more? Is all the tout sites saying recency bias, or is it Joe down the street mashing buttons on the Draftkings app?
Right. And there's a weird thing with these two teams because they both play at a high altitude in their regular home court, and they're both really good defensive teams regularly. But Denver was one of the worst defensive teams in Orlando in the bubble, and we're still in the bubble. So is there something about playing at sea level that's making these teams higher paced? They don't have kind of the high altitude defensive advantage. I don't know. Like this game could end up being higher scoring naturally. I mean, I put up 230 points in regulation on Monday. So we'll see. It wasn't all overtime.
Yeah, what's your analysis on sort of the rotation here? Is there something, if you could pull one thing out of the rotation that you're sort of really keying in on today, what is it?
So I think you probably covered it pretty well. I do think like PJ Dozier got some play in overtime, maybe a little bit more in the fourth quarter than I would have expected, just because they wanted an extra ball handler on the court. I do think those minutes could go back to Michael Porter Jr. And so he's not someone that I'm looking at like in cash games or like an optimal play. But we know he has really high upside, and so he could be totally under-owned because he put up a bad first game.
Yeah, I do like Michael Porter Jr. If he's able to play just a shred of defense today, he's going to bounce right back to that 35 minute total today, and that's sort of limited in the coach's eyes a little bit. We saw Monte Morris too. He had 29, so that was about 24. What's like a guy playing 24 minutes today? Does that really get on your radar? To me, it's like a 1 in 150. I know you'll throw that out there every once in a while, but I don't know. Probably not doing it for me.
I mean, he is a regular part of the rotation, but he's not someone I'm hugely interested in. He's cheap on FanDuel, I guess cheap on both sites, but there's an opportunity cost with every roster spot. And I kind of regret it. He's only seeing pretty limited time. He's not a huge scorer. What can he really do with those 24 minutes that's going to justify a roster spot in kind of a playoff environment where so many guys are getting like 38, 40 minutes?
Yeah, and I want to Jokic or Embiid today. This is like the question, right? They're the same price on FanDuel. Jokic, if you listen to the morning grind, Carlucci was on there. Playoff Jokic is not regular season Jokic. Playoff Jokic plays almost 40 minutes, in a regulation and things like that. You got Embiid too, whose per minutes are great and his minutes are skyrocketing. How do you break the tie? I think, on DraftKings, you can play both of them if you want. It might not be the smartest idea to do. You can actually get both of them and play Luka. And there's enough like 3 to 4K guys on DraftKings to really make some ultra high upside lineups if you want to do that. How are you breaking the tie between those two?
I have Embiid projected higher, so I'm probably going to be leaning more towards Embiid. But I agree. It's something weird about this matchup with Utah because, Rudy Gobert is a really good defensive player, but Jokic just seems to eat him up over and over again. Is there something about like Jokic's skill set, which is kind of a unique skill set for an NBA player, that Gobert just doesn't handle well? I don't know. I mean, I think Jokic is a great tournament option. I saw in the expert survey as I was filling it out, like everyone liked Embiid as their top cash play, and then Jokic was getting a lot of consideration for tournaments. So I don't know. I think they're probably going to be about equally owned. It's really tough. Like I like Embiid, but yeah, I'm going to have a lot of Jokic as well.
We've got Embiid 4-3 on 40-30 on FanDuel. We've got Embiid slight edge on DraftKings, even at the price is just a smidge higher on DraftKings compared to Jokic. So the gap isn't as big there, but currently it looks like Embiid a very slight ownership advantage over Jokic. Well, I don't know if it's an advantage or a disadvantage when you're talking higher. So that's some analysis. I think the key takeaway from this is maybe Torrey Craig gets, if he gets his third quarter run, right? Literally his 3 fouls, gets benched, and then literally immediately a turnover and gets yanked. I think he probably bumps back up in minutes a little bit, in my opinion. And that looks like a guy like Jeremy Grant maybe sees maybe 30 minutes today or something like that. So that's how I'm projecting Torrey Craig. So if you like him, I think he probably gets a little bit bump in minutes compared to the first game. If we go over to Utah, it's pretty obvious who you want to play here. Without Mike Conley, right, you're going to have Donovan Mitchell. It takes a historic game from him for them to really stay in that first game, and then they still lose the game to begin with. Let's talk about him and his ownership, because on FanDuel, let me just bring up all of Utah on Lineup HQ. We're projecting Donovan Mitchell for basically no ownership currently on FanDuel, 10%. And on DraftKings, we're projecting Donovan Mitchell for 14.5%. So the recency bias people, they are not in the ownership projections here. They do not know anything about that. And he's got a real high. He's 9,200 on DraftKings. That's a little bit of a tough sell compared to the 8,200 over on FanDuel.
Yeah, so I'm probably going to try to be a little bit over on the ownership projections on Donovan Mitchell. But I mean, 9,200 is a tough price tag. That's almost Embiid territory, right? Like, if you're sitting there and you're trying to decide, which, who's going to get the utility spot, I don't know. Like, I don't see that Donovan Mitchell can have that repeat performance. I think some of that could go like Joe Ingles or Royce O'Neal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of what we're expecting, but it's tough. Mitchell had a absurd game.
It was the third most points scored in a playoff game in NBA history.
Yeah, it was difficult to win a tournament without Donovan Mitchell in your lineup. So
it was impossible to win a tournament without.
I was thinking of the live final where it was 2 days, and I think the winner actually didn't have him. But I don't know. The thing is, like, if you are multi-entering, if he's projected at 9% ownership, you can have him at 10% and you're over the field, and it's still, if he has a dud, then you're still live with 90% of your entries. So I'll probably aim to be a little bit over the field, but not by a huge amount.
Yeah, Mitchell was why Porter got benched. He was just destroying him every time they did a little switch or things like that. So, and also he had people in chat want to know his usage, 42.59% usage in one game this year was his usage higher than that. So
yeah,
pretty hard to expect that sort of usage again from him in this game. Even if you give him like a high 30s, that's even a mid 30s is a pretty high usage for him.
Yeah, and you have to expect that Denver is going to make some kind of adjustment to try to contain him, and maybe some of that flows to the other players on Utah.
So I think Mitchell Mitchell at low ownership. I don't know on DraftKings on FanDuel. What's the switch? It's him or Paul George today, I think is the swap at shooting guard, right?
Yeah, I think so. So yeah,
George is 81 and Mitchell is 82. And I think everyone's going to be going to Paul George today.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so I think I like him on FanDuel at sub 10% ownership over there. That looks pretty juicy to me. So I like that. The rest of the Jazz you mentioned, I think we got to talk about them. I think you know what you're getting with Rudy Gobert. You mentioned that, Jokic sort of has his way with them. If you want 35, 30 to 35 fantasy points on your site of choice today, you can probably take Gobert. I think there are games where he has some upside. I don't know if this is the absolute best game for him in that particular matchup. I think, you know what you're getting with him. But a guy like Joe Ingles, he's going to do a lot of ball handling today. Didn't really do too much in the overtime. He's going to play 38 minutes in a close game. And we saw Royce O'Neal. He basically, I think, got into a little bit of foul trouble, which limited his minutes, and basically zero burger for the entire second half / overtime, 1.2 fantasy points after the second half. That's going to see an uptick if the people that used him last time move away from him. I think he's in store for a reasonable bounce back game.
I think so, and he's cheap. He doesn't kill you, even if he puts up another dud. But I think Denver's got to adjust. They're going to have to try to contain Donovan Mitchell, and so that I think that puts Joe Ingles, who had a good first game, and Royce O'Neal into play a little bit more. O'Neal was actually playing fairly well. He ran into foul trouble, and so then it was he was coming in, he was being very, very cautious on the defensive end, and finally they just kind of subbed him out. But yeah, he was being cautious on the offensive end as well. He's not a huge upside player, but he's not priced very high either. So.
Yeah, would you play? So what is he? I'm going to pull up DraftKings here real quick. So he's 3,700 on DraftKings at small forward / power forward. I'm going to see what else is sort of in that price range down there, and we're going to play a what if. Do you want to play Royce or Maxi Kleber was drawing a lot of talk earlier in the day. His ownership is really high today. Who you got between those two?
It's interesting because Porzingis is questionable, so Kleber could.
I'm guessing Porzingis plays, but you don't really know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing he plays as well. Because he didn't look limited last game. He got ejected. So I mean, we'll get there, but I think that might be driving some of the ownership interest in Kleber. I'd probably take O'Neal over Kleber.
I'm not in love with Kleber today at all. I don't understand. I mean, I get it because the price is low and you want to jam in the studs, but I think I would take Royce O'Neal over him at the same price. I think Royce is much safer minutes than a guy like Maxi Kleber today.
Yeah, I agree. And we don't really know what'll happen. I think Porzingis is going to play. I think he's fine. But yeah, they could start like Seth Curry. They could start Boban. So we don't really know. And I think the possibility of Porzingis missing is playing a little bit into the projection for Kleber. So yeah, I like Royce O'Neal better at the price.
All right, give me what you think you're going to do with Jordan Clarkson. He's basically the final guy on Utah. We've got to talk about how are you handling him today?
So I like him. I mean, he's still a good value. I think there's a 4,700 on DraftKings. That fills a guard spot, but I'm comfortable with that because he really should see the good minutes and good usage with Conley not playing.
He's in half the lineups on DraftKings today. You over that?
At half the lineups, I'm probably under it a little bit, but I mean it's going to be tough, right? You need to save salary somewhere. He's a high upside guy, so yeah. I mean, when you get down to you've got a guard spot about 4,700 left, he's a really good option.
He looks pretty good there.
Yeah, that's why he's going to be in about half the lineups. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of tough to get away from him at that price. There is a pivot I like, which is Alec Burks, but Clarkson's probably a little safer.
All right, let's go to the next game. We've got Philadelphia at Boston, and this game's going to be a little different. Let's start on the Boston side because we got Gordon Hayward out, which is 34 and a half minutes out of the starting lineup for Boston today. I think what I think is going to happen, I would expect Marcus Smart to start. Are we in agreement on that?
I think so. Yeah.
And then The bench guys, I guess I just want to handle this off the top. I'm not really on any of the other bench guys. I think Smart just plays a couple of minutes, and then all of the rest of the bench guys maybe play like 2 or 3 more minutes each, and it really doesn't contribute to any of those. So I'm really just factoring in Marcus Smart a little bit more and not really looking at too many of the bench options. And it seems like you're on that same page.
Yeah, exactly. To summarize in a sentence, I think Smart's going to get the start, and I think Tatum's going to get the usage increase.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that can see. So I've got Boston's usage. Hey, look at all this cool stuff we got here in Rotogrinders. So I actually pulled this up. We've got a pretty large sample with Hayward off the floor this year. In terms of fantasy points, it's Kemba Walker, 2 fantasy points more per 36. In terms of usage, it's Jason Tatum with almost 3% more usage. This is on Court IQ if you wanted to look at that. So let's talk about them. You mentioned Tatum getting the usage, and we've got Kemba getting the fantasy points. I mean, I like fantasy points. We are trying to score fantasy points, and I do like Tatum. Tatum basically showed he is the guy for Boston. I think in that first game, I'm expecting that to continue as well. We got Kemba. He played 35 minutes. I think that maybe even ticks up a little bit if the game's close. Maybe not too many more, but the overall fantasy production as he starts working his way back, he's still cheap, right? I think Kemba looks really good today.
But yeah, I like Kemba, especially on FanDuel. The point guard position is pretty weak, but I like him on both sites. There's more of an opportunity cost on DraftKings because there's so many good guards. But yeah, I like Kemba on both sides.
Yeah, and then Tatum came in, I think it was like 15, 10, something like that percent owned, and just a monster. Barely comes out of the game, 41 minutes. I think it's pretty safe to say he's going to play over 40 minutes in this playoff run here, especially with Gordon Hayward out. He gets the usage. Usage is always good. It leads to more points in the basket, which is the easiest way to score fantasy points overall. You got to like him today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Tatum's one of the main plays on today's slate. But I think he's become the guy for Boston. It's in the playoffs. He's going to play a ton of minutes. He can do a lot with them. Hayward's out. I mean, it's a great spot for him.
Looking at his ownership really quick on both sites, Tatum. What if I told you he's 16% owned on DraftKings? He has 9K, right? So just a little bit more. You get one of the centers or something like that in your utility to jam in. A little more, you get Luka. FanDuel just 22%. You got to roster 2 power forwards on FanDuel, and if your lineup looks like what the optimal does, right? Everyone's spending down at power forward today, I think, on FanDuel. So that looks like a really great leverage spot, chucking him in over on FanDuel today.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm gonna be over that ownership percentage. I'm a little surprised that's so low, but I guess I still have to get into a little bit of the roster construction. But I would expect that I'm going to end up over that ownership percentage.
Yeah, let me refresh and make sure that is actually. I know it changes behind the scenes during the shows and sometime, but yeah, that looks like it's accurate as of right now. So if he's 22% owned, hey, that looks like a good leverage spot to me, specifically on FanDuel. The other guy's Marcus Smart, right? I think he's just fine for his price. Mm-hmm. Can get if he has one of the blocks and steals games, gives you a little bit of upside, but he should definitely outperform what he did in the first game, in my opinion. Generally plays a little bit better when he's in the starting lineup. But then there's always I guess we got to find the Allen Lem flow chart, right? And we got to find that is Marcus Smart high owned? Don't use him, right? One of those. We should go retweet those. But I like him. I think he projects well. He's 5,600 on FanDuel. He's reasonably priced on DraftKings. And if you're not jamming in 3 9K plus players on DraftKings, he sort of fits that little mid-tier build every now and then.
Yeah, he's tough. He's such a frustrating player because he's primarily a kind of defensive stopper. So like there's times when he just focuses on defense and really doesn't play a huge role in the offense. Like last game, he was 32 minutes and he really didn't put up much of anything. So I don't know. I mean, I prefer Tatum. Obviously Tatum's much more expensive, but I kind of prefer Tatum and then try to save somewhere else. I mean, I'll have some Marcus Smart lineups, but there's a little bit of an opportunity cost on FanDuel because you're losing a couple of shooting guards that I like, and then like DraftKings. I mean, I'll fit him in when he's the piece that where I have that much salary left, but God, he can be frustrating.
Yeah. So I think rank your Celtics in preference of order of using them today.
Tatum 1, Kemba 2, and then Marcus Smart.
Yeah, I think it's 1A, 1B, Tatum and Kemba for me. I think both of those are really good plays. If you want ownership, you can go to Jaylen Brown. No one's really going to be on him today. I don't think he's not the sexy name. I think he has some upside. You can mix in some Smart. I'm not really playing the Wanamakers. I'm not playing any of the centers. Tice, I don't know, not really the guy I'm interested in today. So between those four, that's what I'm looking at. Philadelphia.
So I just think Jalen's a little banged up. Like I think he hurt his ankle, and it looked like he's going to play, but it might still be hurting him.
Yeah, I'm expecting these guys. They get the good injections before the game.
They get the good stuff.
I'm expecting them to play just fine. All right, moving on over to Philadelphia. You mentioned Alec Burks, but let's talk. The stars here first. Is Joel Embiid, and played 38 minutes. If Joel Embiid played 38 minutes in the regular season, what is he, $11,000 player on DraftKings,
right.
Something, 10,500 to 11,000 on FanDuel. And he's sitting here at under 10,000 on DraftKings, and he's seeing 9,300 with Jokic. You already said you prefer Embiid. I think that's probably the take most people have today, because when the minutes are there, he's just such a good per minute producer. And he actually sort of underperformed in this first game as well and still had 50 fantasy points. I think I prefer him as well in cash. On FanDuel, definitely, I think I'm going to play Embiid. On DraftKings, if you have the extra $200, I think you go to Embiid over Jokic, and I think Jokic is a fine consolation prize because you get the playoff Jokic minutes of 37 plus is great too. Do you see any reason to not really want to play a lot of Embiid today?
No, I mean, I think he's a monster, and so I think he's one of the highest upside players on the slate.
What are we doing with the rest of the game? I want to go over a couple of things here. So we had Matisse Thybulle didn't start, but then he ends up in the closing lineup in favor of guys like Shake Milton and Al Horford, and then Alec Burks also closes basically instead of those two. Guess the closing lineup today. I don't know if we really know. Thybulle's out there to play some defense. I understand, playing him, they could just, hey, let's just get the ball to Joel Embiid, and Thybulle, you're in there for defense instead of guys like having Horford out there today. How do you see this closing lineup playing out with Shake and Horford, and then we have Burks and Thybulle, sort of the bench guys that ended up getting the run at the end of the game yesterday or 2 days ago?
Yeah, I'm guessing it's going to be the same. And so actually, I'm interested in the Philadelphia bench players. I like both Burks and Thybulle. Thybulle, I think no player. I haven't studied this, but I feel like no player has a higher percentage of his points come from blocks and steals than Thybulle. So I'm really interested in him on FanDuel because he's a really cheap small forward, and if he gets 3-4 blocks and steals, he's making value almost off of just those. And then Alec Burks, he's a scorer, he's a gunner, comes in off the bench. And with this condensed rotation, I mean, he's playing big enough minutes that if he gets a fantasy point per minute, he's still low priced. And I don't think people are really going to be on him because he's coming off the bench.
Yeah, so 30% usage in the first game there, which is really high if you guys don't follow usage numbers. So if that was to continue, I think Burks is, I think wasn't on a show, but he was like the Clarkson swerve, and he's still a Clarkson swerve, in my opinion, if you're trying to get off that ownership.
I think so. And I think he's getting some benefit from Ben Simmons being out. Where, I think Embiid's getting a lot of the usage bump, but I think, that could help explain the closing lineup a little bit more, where if they have, previously if they have Ben Simmons, that's another ball handler in the closing lineup, and now they need Alec Burks out there because Simmons isn't.
I see someone in chat, Tobias Harris safe for 35 to 40 floor today. I say yes, he's going to play 39 minutes in a close game. He's got some upside in there too, right? Don't feel he's very safe, but every once in a while he busts out for those big games. What's your if Harris lands on my lineup, I'm certainly okay with that today.
Yeah, I don't see any reason that I would avoid him. I think he is. I think he's a good safe play, and he has some upside. I mean, it's the playoffs, so kind of everyone has some upside. He's not. Tobias Harris isn't someone that's projecting into my optimal lineup, but I'll definitely have some of them in tournaments because he's right there.
Yeah, and then we had Josh Richardson, who really had a bad bubble except for maybe one game. He bumps up to 38 minutes. I like to see that. Where does he land in terms of what you're doing today? Just the 5,100 on DraftKings, the 49 on FanDuel. It's like no man's land of really where you want to use players today.
It is, and it's tough because I never see Josh Richardson kind of put up those monster games that, I feel like he's going to put up another 25 points at about 5,000 on both sites, and that's not enough to really get me interested. I mean, I guess if I had 5,000 left, I'd consider if it kind of correlates well with the rest of the lineup. But I'm not hugely interested in him.
And a guy like Shake Milton, again, I'm not doing GPPs today. I'm on the show. Too much stuff going on for me, but I don't know. I don't think I'd play any Shake Milton today. Where do you stand on him?
It's tough because he's a rookie. I like him a little bit on FanDuel because if you're trying to save money, like point guard's a weak position on FanDuel today. So I could see putting some Shake in there.
You want him or Beverly for your cheap point guard?
Yeah, it's tough. I'll probably split it in tournaments. I'm not predicting a monster game from Shake Milton, but he's super cheap.
Just let you do other that gets you your spend up to a guy like Jason Tatum at power forward, Bill.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, and hey, maybe there's a little bit of correlation on that as well. All right, final game of the night. Let's start on Dallas. Porzingis, questionable. I'm expecting him to play. He got ejected in the first game for. Didn't really make any sense to me. I watched the what he got called for in an opening series, right? That seems pretty ludicrous that he got ejected. I'm expecting him to basically play. We see Maxi Kleber is drawing a ton of ownership right now. I'm not thrilled with that. I don't love him. I think a lot of his run was, obviously due to Porzingis probably being out as well. We've got, if you have the money for Luka, go and play Luka. Seems extremely safe for that 50 to 60 range and can obviously pop off for more. I guess let's talk. How are you handling Porzingis? Very tough to use on FanDuel. You basically there's nothing to really swap to. If you get news that he's out, you got to save yourself money to get to Tatum, or you're just taking a big L on some salary somewhere.
Yeah.
On DraftKings, you can throw him in your utility, and you got I think Paul George you can swap to or something like that. But I'm expecting him to play. I'm expecting him to not get ejected, and I'm expecting him to post some pretty good fantasy numbers when he's in there.
Yeah, I really like him as a tournament option because I think the questionable designation is going to throw people off. So if you're willing to sit there and wait for the news and late swap as required, then I think he's a really good play. We get some benefit because Jason Tatum is the second to last game of the night. So let's say news comes out after lock, but before 6, I got the potential swap you can do on FanDuel. And then DraftKings, you do have the benefit of swapping to Paul George, like put Porzingis in the utility spot, and then Paul George is just as good of a player, or projected just about as high at just about the salary.
Someone in chat, Porzingis or Tatum? I would agree. Tatum for sure, but is very interesting to use Porzingis in tournaments.
Yeah, I agree. I think Jason Tatum is probably the cash game play because we know he's going to play. And they're about the same salary. So like FanDuel, they're about the same salary, same position, about the same projection. So I think cash games, I probably lean strongly towards Jason Tatum just because there's no injury question whatsoever. It's a weird injury designation because why would they just throw him on there at the questionable? And I think it was even like a questionable game time decision. It makes me a little nervous. I don't understand it at all. He didn't look limited at all last game. He got ejected. So. But yeah, I think if you're using them, you have to be able to late swap and know what your late swap strategy is going to be.
So looking at Kleber, played 4, 5, 6, 7, I don't know, 13 minutes in the first half. Maybe you give him about 26 minutes if that was to continue, something like that. And, he's just rocketing up the ownership, but maybe it's come down a little bit. He's 45% on DraftKings, and he's 42. Oh, let me see here. Maybe he went down. So he's come down on FanDuel quite a bit, but he's 3,600, and I get it because it allows you to min max and he's in there, but I don't know. We got him at 27 minutes. Maybe that's all right. I don't know. I guess I'm just down on Kleber. He had like no usage in this game either.
Yeah, that's what kind of bothered me as well. I mean, I guess the concern is that like he could start, and like if Porzingis is out, he gets a big bump. But I don't know. Again, yeah, we both kind of think Porzingis is going to play. So, and I do question. I think sometimes the ownership percentages and projections are factoring in a guy being questionable, and that there's a 20% chance Porzingis misses the game, so we're going to give Cleaver like a 20% usage bump. Where he's going to get some bump in the projections, and I feel like that could be affecting the ownership projections. I'm not sure.
The peripheral guys, so like Luka, where's your stand on him? You want a lot of Luka? You want what the field has? You want under Luka today? He's the highest priced player by far.
I do. I do want Luka. I'm probably going to aim to be over the field on him. I mean, he's always a triple double threat. So on DraftKings, that's significant. It's a 3-point bonus, right? So yeah, I mean, I'm going to aim to be over the field. It's just tough. Where do you find the value with playoff minutes?
Yeah, you can make him and then like two other. You can play Luka, Jokic, and Embiid pretty easily. You can mix and Tatum into one of those two because there's that plethora of the 3 to 4,700 Jordan Clarkson plays that really allow you to jam those and make some fun lineups for ultimate upside if you like doing that sort of thing today. The Timmy Hardaway Jr., the Dorian Finney-Smiths, I guess DFS is just priced low enough, 4,300. Drawing a little bit of ownership. Not thrilled to use him, maybe more on DraftKings than on FanDuel. And Hardaway Jr., if Porzingis is out, right, the usage has to go somewhere, but I'm expecting Porzingis to play, so I'm a little bit lower on sort of the peripheral pieces.
Yeah, I mean, playoffs, teams are trying to run the ball through their best players, right? So, like, if they're both healthy, like Luka and Porzingis are going to be, eating up a huge chunk of the usage. We saw last game with Porzingis getting ejected, then, Tim Hardaway Jr. ended up having a pretty good game because suddenly some of that's trickling down to him, instead of Porzingis. So, yeah, I mean, if Porzingis is out, then I'm very interested in Tim Hardaway Jr., but otherwise, he's just kind of a peripheral piece.
All right, we'll close it out with the Clippers analysis for you here. First, we've got Kawhi Leonard. There's no baby in Kawhi Leonard or Paul George. It's playoff time. These guys are sort of penciled in for 38 minutes, in my opinion. I really, maybe even a little bit more in some cases. I think they're both amazing plays. We saw Kawhi put up a massive stat line. Paul George is a little bit too cheap, I think, on both sites for his ability to post big games. I don't really see how you can argue against me on this one, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And so Kawhi, really interested in, he's a small forward on FanDuel, so that's a hard position to fill. And so if you can fill it with a guy that's seeing so much of the offense run through him, that's always appealing. So yeah, I mean, I'm interested in Kawhi first, I think, and then Paul George, and some of that is just positionally as well.
All right, a couple of the secondary pieces. Let's hash out the centers between these two. So we've got Montrezl Harrell, who's back. He played 15 minutes, and we saw Zubac play 22 minutes. If Zubac always projects pretty well on a per-minute basis, the problem is I would like him to play like 27 minutes, not 22 minutes. And with Harrell back, I think it's just going to eat into some of them. I'd much rather play Zubac. There's a chance Harrell starts getting more run too. I don't know. I'm sort of out on both of them today.
I agree. Harrell's going to come back at some point and play major minutes, and it's going to surprise everyone. But I get the feeling it's not going to be tonight because it's only his second game back. It's only 2 days rest. So Harrell's kind of a guy I've got in mind because I think the price might keep dropping as he keeps seeing limited minutes, and then suddenly he's going to be unleashed at a really cheap price. But yeah, the whole Clippers bench is kind of in flux because Patrick Beverley just came back. He played a little bit more minutes than I was expecting. I think he was even questionable heading into the game. So I have some interest in Beverley as a really cheap guard. So
I like Beverley as the cheap guard play too. I think Lou Williams, if he's going to play 31 minutes, he can chuck it. I think he's slightly interesting for those like little mid-tier builds. I think he makes some sense. And then the other guy I have some interest in is is Marcus Morris Sr. He's out there playing a lot of minutes. He still has some usage. He's still grabbing boards. He's too cheap in my opinion.
Yeah, he is. I like Marcus Morris as a bench piece. I think, or no, sorry, not as a bench piece, as like an under-owned piece, because I think everyone kind of overlooks him. But he's playing probably more and with more intensity than he would during the regular season.
Yeah, he's on the good team gunning for the championship. Well, that's going to do it for the show today, guys. Don't forget, if you are premium members, Crunch Time is coming up next. If you've got play this guy or that guy, any means, we'll run through that with you on Crunch Time for all you premium members on both FanDuel and Draftkings. The $87,500 man, John, thanks for joining me on the show again. Congrats on your live finals. What was it, eighth place yesterday?
Yeah, it's tied for eighth, but I'll take it.
Yeah, you'll take that. And again, thanks to everyone for watching and participating in the show. For John, I'm Britt, and we out, y'all.